"I was sold for $6, she cried. "But he said you were never for sale in my eyes." She was only 8 years old when the world around her began to feel like it had turned against her. The small house she lived in was never quiet, filled with shouting, tension, and the smell of stale food. Her parents had loved her once, she thought, but over the years, love had been replaced by struggles and anger. Money was always short, and the bills never seemed to stop. Every day was a battle to find enough food to eat, clean clothes to wear, and a safe place to sleep. Her childhood, instead of being filled with laughter and games, was filled with worry, hunger, and fear. She would watch other children from her neighborhood playing outside, their hands sticky with candy, faces glowing with joy. They laughed freely, ran barefoot on the grass, and chased each other with no worries. She wanted to join them, to feel free, to have friends who would play with her, but she could not. Every day she had chores to do. She helped her mother sweep the floors, wash the dishes, and sometimes carry water from the well. She would wake before sunrise and fall asleep after sunset, exhausted. Yet even with all her hard work, it never seemed enough. Her family's poverty was crushing. Her father had lost his job at the factory years ago, and he had never been able to find stable work again. He spent most days sitting outside, staring blankly, muttering to himself. Her mother tried her best, sewing clothes for neighbors and cleaning houses, but it was never enough to make ends meet. They were constantly behind on rent, and often the landlord would threaten to kick them out. Every knock at the door sent chills down her spine, because she feared it was the landlord, angry once again. The little girl quickly learned to take care of herself. She learned which alleys were safe to walk through, which neighbors were kind, and which ones she should avoid. She learned how to stretch a small amount of food to last the whole day, and how to hide when there was danger nearby. At school, she tried to focus, but hunger and exhaustion often made it impossible. She loved learning, loved the moments when the teacher explained something new, when her imagination could take her away from the harsh reality of her home. But even school could not protect her from the constant fear of what awaited her at home. One day when she was walking through the dusty streets, she overheard her parents talking in hushed voices. She stopped and listened carefully. Her heart began to race. She could not believe what she was hearing. Her mother's voice trembled as she said, "We have no choice. It's the only way." Her father replied softly, almost ashamed, "I know. It breaks my heart, but we must do this." She didn't understand at first. Did they mean to leave her somewhere? Did they mean to send her away? The words were heavy, confusing, and frightening. She ran back home, but the questions only grew louder in her mind. That evening, a man came to their small home. He was a stranger, wearing simple clothes and a calm smile. Her parents spoke to him in low voices. She tried to understand, but she could not. The man spoke briefly and handed her father a few coins. Her father counted them carefully, then handed them over to her mother. She stood in the corner, frozen, her small hands clenching at her sides. She realized slowly, like a cold drop of water, that something terrible was happening. The man looked at her kindly, but with an air of authority. Her parents spoke softly, telling her to obey him, that everything would be fine. She wanted to run, but her legs felt like they were made of lead. Fear kept her in place. That night, she left the only home she had ever known, walking into the unknown. Her small heart pounded in her chest. She had never been away from her parents, from the street she knew, from the little school she loved. Every step she took felt heavier than the last, as if the world was pressing down on her. The streets outside were dark and unfamiliar. The man led her through narrow alleys, past empty shops and abandoned buildings. She looked around, trying to memorize every detail. She wanted to remember something of the life she was leaving behind. Her mind wandered to the times she had played with a worn-out ball with her neighbors, to the small moments when her mother had smiled at her, to the few times her father had picked her up and held her close. Now, all of that seemed far away, almost like a dream. She did not cry at first. Her mind was numb. But as they walked further, the reality sank in. She was leaving her home forever. Her tiny hands trembled, and her lips quivered. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The man noticed her silence and tried to comfort her, but his words did not reach her heart. She wanted to go back, to turn around and run home, but there was no way back. That door had closed, and she was alone in a world she did not understand. Days turned into nights, and the life she knew disappeared completely. She was given a small place to sleep, a cold mattress and thin blankets that did little to keep her warm. She was fed, but the food was minimal, barely enough to fill her stomach. She did not understand why her parents had made such a decision, why they had treated her as if she were an object to be handed over. She had so many questions, so many fears, and nowhere to turn. Every night, she cried silently, wishing someone would see her as a person, not as something to be bought and sold. Despite the fear and confusion, she began to notice small acts of kindness from the people around her. The neighbor who offered her a warm smile, the worker who gave her a piece of fruit, the old lady who stroked her hair gently. These small gestures became a lifeline. They reminded her that not everyone in the world was cruel, that perhaps there were people who could see her worth. Even in the darkness, there was a tiny glimmer of hope. She also began to discover an inner strength she never knew she had. She learned to speak up when something was wrong, to take care of herself when no one else could, and to find small joys in the day. A bird singing in the morning, a flower growing between the cracks in the pavement, the laughter of other children she glimpsed from afar. These small things became treasures. They reminded her that life could still hold beauty, even when it was cruel and unfair. One evening, as she sat alone in her small room, clutching a thin blanket to her chest, she made a promise to herself. She would survive. She would not let the circumstances define her. She might be small and powerless now, but one day, she would find a way to reclaim her life, to find someone who could see her as a human being, someone who could show her that she had value, that she was worthy of love and respect. Little did she know, that promise she made to herself would become the foundation of her future. That spark of hope, fragile as it was, would guide her through the darkest days. It would give her courage to face challenges she could not yet imagine. And somewhere, in a world full of strangers, there was a person waiting to see her true worth, not as an object, not as a possession, but as a human being deserving of dignity, care, and love. The night was long, but she clung to that hope with everything she had, and in the silence, amidst the fear and sorrow, she whispered to herself, "I will survive. I will not let this world take my spirit. I am worth more than they can ever imagine." Life after leaving her home was far harder than she had imagined. Every day seemed to stretch endlessly, filled with fear and uncertainty. The man who had taken her in treated her with a strange mix of kindness and control. At times he would give her a small smile, a gentle pat on the head, or a few words of encouragement, but he never explained much about where she was going, why she had been brought there, or what her future held. She felt invisible most of the time, like a shadow that no one truly noticed. The first few days were the hardest. She missed her home, her small neighborhood, the worn-out school books she had left behind. Even though life at home had been difficult, there had been familiarity there, and familiarity brings comfort. Now, everything was new, strange, and often frightening. She did not understand the rules of this new place. She did not know who to trust, and every unfamiliar face seemed like a threat. She learned quickly that asking too many questions could be dangerous, so she began to stay quiet, watching and listening instead. She was given chores to do, small tasks that seemed simple but were exhausting for her tiny hands and tired body. She swept the floors until her arms ached, washed clothes in a cold bucket of water, and prepared meals that were barely enough to fill her stomach. At night, she would lie awake on a thin mattress, shivering under a threadbare blanket, wondering if she would ever see her parents again. Her tears often soaked the pillow, but she would wipe her face before morning, forcing herself to look brave and obedient. She knew that showing fear or sadness would not make her situation better. Despite the hardships, she noticed that this new place was different from her home. There were other children around, some older, some younger, all living under the same strict rules. Some were quiet and obedient like her. Others were rebellious, trying to test the boundaries and see what they could get away with. She watched them closely, learning how to move silently, how to avoid drawing attention, and how to protect herself when things got difficult. Each day taught her something new, and slowly she began to understand this strange world she had been thrust into. Even though she was scared and lonely, there were moments of unexpected kindness. A neighbor might slip her a piece of bread, or an older child might share a toy with her. These small gestures became lifelines, tiny reminders that the world was not entirely cruel. They gave her hope, even if it was fragile. She began to believe that perhaps there were people who could see her as more than just a child in a difficult situation. People who could treat her with dignity and respect. School, if she could call it that, was different too. There were lessons, but they were often short and interrupted. She learned to read a little, to write a few words, and to count numbers, but the learning came with constant distractions and fear. She worried about doing something wrong and being punished. Sometimes she would make small mistakes, and the man would frown or sigh, leaving her feeling ashamed. But she never gave up completely. She clung to the belief that knowledge might be her escape, her way to a better life. Food was always scarce. Some days she would have a full meal. Other days she would have to go without. Hunger gnawed at her, making it hard to focus or think clearly. She learned to ration what little she had, hiding small pieces of bread or fruit so she could eat them later when she was alone. Hunger became a constant companion, reminding her of the harsh reality she was living in. Yet, even in these difficult moments, she found a strange strength in surviving each day. Every day she endured was a small victory, proof that she could withstand more than she had thought possible. The nights were the hardest. When the house grew silent and the moon cast shadows across the floor, her mind would replay memories of her home, of her parents, of the life she had lost. She would curl up on the thin mattress, hugging herself for warmth, and whisper to herself, "I can survive. I have to survive." The fear of being forgotten, of being alone forever, was overwhelming, but she held on to the tiny spark of hope she had nurtured since leaving home. That hope became her shield, protecting her from despair. One afternoon, while carrying water from the well, she saw a small group of children playing a game in the distance. They laughed and shouted, their voices full of joy and freedom. She stopped and watched them, her heart aching with longing. For a moment, she let herself imagine running and playing with them, feeling the sun on her face, the wind in her hair, and the laughter of friends around her. But reality quickly returned, and she turned away, knowing that such freedom was not hers. Still, the memory of that moment stayed with her, a reminder that happiness could exist somewhere in the world. Her life was not just difficult, it was also lonely. She missed having someone to talk to, someone who would listen without judgment or anger. The man who had brought her here spoke rarely and often with authority, not warmth. She longed for someone to explain things to her, to answer her questions, to guide her through this strange new world. But there was no one. She learned to rely on herself, to trust her own instincts, and to find small ways to comfort herself when the days were too long and the nights too cold. Despite everything, she discovered resilience within herself. These days she faced challenges, hunger, exhaustion, fear, but she did not give up. She found joy in small things, a clean sheet, a warm cup of water, a kind word from a stranger. She began to understand that survival was not just about staying alive, but about finding reasons to keep going, even when hope seemed distant. These small victories gave her strength, and slowly she began to believe that she could endure anything. One evening, as she sat alone in the corner of the small room, she noticed the man watching her. He did not speak, but there was a softness in his eyes that she had not seen before. It was not much, but it was enough to make her feel seen, if only a little. She realized that perhaps not everyone in the world was cruel, that there were people who could show care and respect even in small ways. This realization gave her hope, a faint light in the darkness of her new life. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. She began to adapt to her new environment, learning routines and understanding rules. But she never stopped longing for something more, something that would remind her that she was valued and loved, not just another child in a difficult situation. She began to dream quietly, imagining a future where she could feel safe, where she could laugh without fear, and where someone could truly see her worth. Her courage grew with each passing day. She learned to navigate the challenges around her, to protect herself, and to find comfort in small acts of kindness. She began to hold on to the belief that life could be better, that there were people out there who could care for her, guide her, and help her find a place in the world where she truly belonged. That hope, fragile as it was, became her anchor, keeping her steady even when the storm of her reality threatened to overwhelm her. And then one day, a small, unexpected event changed everything. A neighbor, noticing the sadness in her eyes, offered her a small gift: a loaf of bread, a clean scarf, a kind smile. It was a simple gesture, but to her, it felt monumental. It reminded her that kindness existed, that there were people in the world who could see her as more than her circumstances. She held on to that moment, replaying it in her mind, letting it give her strength. She began to understand that while her life had been unfair and cruel, it was not entirely hopeless. She realized that her journey was far from over. The challenges she faced were immense, but she now believed that she could face them. She had survived the darkest days, endured hunger, loneliness, and fear, and still she remained. That small spark of hope she had nurtured since leaving home had not died. It had grown stronger, guiding her through each difficult moment. She knew that one day somehow she would find someone who could see her true worth, someone who could help her rebuild her life and reclaim the childhood she had lost. Life had settled into a difficult rhythm, but the young girl still held tightly to the hope that one day things could be better. She had learned how to survive, how to navigate the challenges around her, and how to endure long days filled with chores, hunger, and uncertainty. Yet, deep inside, she longed for something more than mere survival. She longed to feel safe, to feel valued, and to experience even a small bit of kindness without strings attached. It was on an ordinary morning, with the sun casting soft light across the dusty streets, that she first noticed him. He was an older man, perhaps in his 40s, with a calm presence that seemed different from anyone she had met before. He was not loud, not harsh, and not intimidating. Instead, he carried himself with quiet confidence, moving through the neighborhood in a way that made people respect him without fear. The girl observed him from a distance, unsure of who he was or what he wanted. But something about his gentle eyes made her feel a strange sense of curiosity and cautious hope. At first he spoke to her in small, simple ways: a nod, a smile, a question about whether she was feeling okay. These small gestures, though subtle, felt monumental to her. She had spent so much of her life being ignored, overlooked, or treated as if she were invisible, that even the smallest acknowledgement made her heart lift. Slowly she began to trust him, speaking in tiny sentences, sharing pieces of her life, and revealing fragments of her story. It was frightening at first because she had learned to be careful, to hide her feelings, and to expect disappointment. But he listened, truly listened. The girl began to notice the way he treated others as well. He did not shout, he did not demand, and he never made anyone feel small. People in the neighborhood respected him, but they also liked him. Children would gather around him, asking questions and laughing at his gentle jokes. Adults would nod in agreement when he spoke, appreciating his wisdom and fairness. Observing him, she realized that kindness could exist alongside strength, that someone could be both gentle and respected. It was a new and inspiring idea, and it gave her hope that perhaps life could hold more than hardship and fear. One day she gathered the courage to share a piece of her story with him. She spoke slowly, her small voice trembling, as she recounted her childhood, the struggles at home, and the day she had been taken away. She did not leave out the pain, the fear, or the loneliness. She told him about the nights she cried herself to sleep, the hunger that had gnawed at her, and the longing for a life that seemed forever out of reach. The man listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging. When she finished, he simply nodded, his eyes reflecting understanding and compassion. It was the first time in her life that someone had heard her story and not dismissed it. No one had judged her. No one had questioned her worth, and no one had made her feel like she was a problem. In that moment, she felt seen. She felt acknowledged as a person, not a burden or a possession. It was a small but powerful moment, and it left a lasting impact on her heart. For the first time, she began to believe that she might have a chance at a better life, that someone could help her heal from the years of hardship she had endured. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. The man would check on her regularly, asking how she was feeling, offering words of encouragement, and helping her with tasks that seemed impossible to handle alone. He guided her with patience, teaching her not only practical skills but also the value of self-respect, confidence, and kindness. He did not rush her, and he never demanded anything in return. Slowly, she began to open up more, sharing her fears, her dreams, and even her small joys. She realized that she was not alone in the world, and that trust, though fragile, could be built with care and patience. Her days became a mixture of chores and small lessons in hope. He taught her to read better, showing her the beauty of words and the power they held. He encouraged her to draw and write, giving her a way to express the emotions she had buried deep inside. She discovered that her thoughts and feelings mattered, that her voice could exist in the world, and that she had a right to be heard. It was a revelation, one that began to change the way she saw herself. She was no longer just a girl surviving each day. She was a girl with potential, with value, and with the ability to shape her own future. But trust did not come easily. She had been hurt before, betrayed by the people who should have protected her. The memory of being sold for a mere $6 haunted her, making her wary of anyone who seemed kind. She would sometimes pull back, retreating into herself when she feared disappointment or pain. Yet the man never gave up. He respected her boundaries, waited patiently, and continued to show that his intentions were genuine. His consistency slowly broke down the walls she had built around her heart. One rainy afternoon, as she sat quietly by the window, watching droplets slide down the glass, she reflected on how much her life had changed in such a short time. The fear that had once consumed her was still present, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned to face challenges with courage, to find small moments of joy, and to recognize the goodness in others. The man had shown her that life could be different, that she did not have to accept cruelty or neglect as the norm. She could imagine a future where she was safe, loved, and respected. It was during moments like these that she realized the depth of her own resilience. She had endured so much, yet she was still here, still breathing, still hoping. The kindness she had received from this man was not just a gift. It was a lifeline, a reminder that the world held more than suffering. It gave her the strength to dream again, to believe that she could have a life beyond fear and despair. And with each passing day, that dream grew a little stronger. The bond they shared was not always easy. There were times when frustration and fear clashed with hope and curiosity. She would sometimes lash out, cry, or retreat, unsure if she could trust the feeling she was experiencing. But he met every challenge with patience, understanding, and unwavering care. He never pushed, never forced, and never judged. In a world that had been harsh and unyielding, his presence was a sanctuary, a place where she could be herself without fear of punishment or rejection. Slowly, she began to notice changes within herself. She felt a growing sense of confidence, a belief that she could face obstacles without being crushed by them. She started to take small steps on her own, completing tasks more efficiently, speaking up when she needed help, and even helping others around her. The transformation was gradual, but undeniable. She was learning that her past did not define her, that her value was not determined by what had been done to her, and that she had the power to shape her own path. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, she sat beside the man and shared a small secret. She admitted her fear that she might never be safe, that life might always be cruel, and that people might never truly care for her. The man listened quietly, nodding, and then spoke softly. "You are stronger than you think. You have survived everything so far, and that shows how brave you are. I see you, and I believe in you." Those words sank deep into her heart, planting a seed of hope that had been dormant for so long. From that day on, the girl began to believe not only in the goodness of others but also in herself. She realized that she had value, that her voice mattered, and that her life could be more than a series of hardships. She began to dream of a future where she could help others, where she could share the lessons she had learned, and where she could live a life filled with dignity, respect, and love. The world was still challenging, but she no longer faced it with fear alone. She faced it with courage, hope, and the knowledge that she was not invisible. As the days turned into weeks, she continued to grow and learn. She took each day as it came, appreciating small joys and holding tightly to the moments of kindness she experienced. She began to understand that life's beauty often came in small, quiet ways, in a smile, a kind word, or a moment of understanding. These moments became treasures, guiding her through difficult times and reminding her that she had the right to hope, to dream, and to believe in a better future. And in the midst of her struggles, she realized the most important lesson of all, that trust, once carefully nurtured, could heal wounds deeper than pain or neglect. The man who had entered her life had shown her that genuine care existed, that she could be valued, and that her past did not define her future. With his support, she began to rebuild her sense of self, step by step, brick by brick, heart by heart. The girl's journey was far from over, but she had taken a crucial step toward healing. She had learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it. She had discovered that hope can exist even in the darkest of times, and that love, when genuine, can transform lives. And most importantly, she had realized that she was not alone, that someone could truly see her worth, and that recognition could change everything. She had come a long way since the days when fear and loneliness had been her closest companions. Yet, even with the small glimmers of hope she had found, the shadows of her past still lingered. Every now and then, memories of the day she had been sold, the emptiness of her childhood, and the night she had cried herself to sleep would return. Unbidden and sharp, they were reminders of how fragile life could be, and how easily the world could seem cruel. But she had also discovered resilience, strength, and the quiet comfort of someone who truly saw her. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the horizon and painted the sky in soft shades of pink and purple, the man she had come to trust asked her to sit with him. They were alone in the small, dimly lit room, the kind of quiet that made her heart beat faster, not out of fear, but because she felt the weight of what was about to happen. He looked at her gently, a softness in his eyes that always made her feel safe, and said, "There is something I need to tell you, and I want you to listen carefully." Her small hands fidgeted in her lap. She felt a strange mix of curiosity and nervousness. What could be so important? She had learned over the years to be cautious, to guard her heart, and to be ready for disappointment. But there was a calmness in his voice that made her trust him despite the fear. She nodded slowly, her eyes wide, and leaned forward to listen. He began by speaking of her worth. He told her gently but firmly that she was more than the circumstances she had endured, more than the hardships she had faced. "You were never for sale in my eyes," he said quietly, looking directly into her eyes. The words struck her in a way that nothing else had. They were simple, but they carried a depth of meaning that made her heart ache with both relief and disbelief. After all the years of being treated as if she were invisible, as if her life and feelings did not matter, someone was telling her that she had value, that she was not a commodity, and that she had never been. Tears welled up in her eyes and she could not hold them back. She cried, her small body shaking with the release of years of fear, grief, and longing. She cried for the nights she had spent alone, for the hunger she had endured, for the moments when she had felt abandoned and unwanted. And she cried because, for the first time, someone had seen her for who she truly was, a human being worthy of care, respect, and love. The man did not speak over her. He simply sat beside her, offering quiet comfort, his presence steady and unwavering. As the tears flowed, she began to speak. Her voice was broken and trembling, but it carried the weight of all she had endured. "I was sold for $6, she whispered, her words barely audible. The memory of that moment which had haunted her for so long felt unbearable, yet in speaking it aloud it began to lose some of its power over her. She realized that saying it, sharing it with someone who truly cared, was the first step toward reclaiming the life that had been stolen from her. The man listened, never judging, never interrupting. When she had finished, he took her small hands in his own and said, What happened to you was wrong. You did not deserve it. But I want you to know something very important. I see you, and you are not defined by what others have done to you. You are strong, brave, and worthy of everything good in this world." The words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, providing comfort that she had never known before. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of safety so profound that it brought a new kind of courage. She realized that she could face her fears, confront the memories of her past, and begin to step into a future where she could be free from the weight of her early years. The man's words were not just comforting, they were transformative. They gave her the strength to believe in herself, to imagine a life beyond survival, and to begin to hope that happiness was possible. The next days were a delicate balance of reflection and action. She thought deeply about her life, the hardships she had endured, and the resilience that had carried her this far. She understood that she had been through experiences that could have broken anyone, yet she was still standing. That realization filled her with a quiet pride, a recognition of her inner strength. It was not an arrogance or boastfulness, but a gentle acknowledgement that she had survived, and that survival itself was a testament to her courage. She also began to see the world differently. Small acts of kindness no longer seemed rare or extraordinary. They felt like threads connecting her to a web of hope and goodness. She noticed neighbors helping one another, children sharing toys without expectation, and adults offering support quietly, without recognition. These observations reinforced the man's message that she was worthy, that life could hold beauty and care, and that people could indeed be trusted when they acted from a place of sincerity. One afternoon, as they walked together through the quiet streets, she shared more of her dreams with him. She spoke of wanting to learn, to help others, and to make a life where no child would ever feel as small, scared, or invisible as she had. The man encouraged her, telling her that dreams were the seeds of the future, and that nurturing them could change the course of her life. His guidance was steady but never controlling. He allowed her to explore her ambitions at her own pace, always reinforcing her confidence rather than imposing his own will. As they continued to spend time together, she began to notice changes in herself that had once seemed impossible. She laughed more freely, without the fear of being punished or belittled. She spoke up when something bothered her, and she began to assert herself in small but meaningful ways. Her sense of self-worth grew daily, nurtured by the trust and kindness she received. Each moment of courage, each small act of confidence, became a building block in the foundation of her new life. But the journey was not without its challenges. Occasionally, memories of betrayal and fear would resurface, causing her to doubt herself and the sincerity of others. She would feel moments of panic, anxiety, and sadness, remembering the times when she had been ignored, dismissed, or treated as if she had no value. Yet each time these moments arose, she reminded herself of the man's words, the truth that had been spoken to her. She was worthy, she was strong, and she was seen. That reminder became a shield against the darkness of her memories, allowing her to face each day with renewed determination. The turning point in her journey came when she fully embraced the understanding that she was not defined by her past. She realized that the pain and hardships she had endured were chapters in her story, not the entirety of it. She could carry the lessons learned from those experiences while still creating a future filled with dignity, hope, and joy. It was a revelation that transformed the way she saw herself and her place in the world. She was no longer a passive observer of her life. She was becoming an active participant, capable of shaping her destiny. One quiet evening, she sat with the man in the small garden behind their home. The sky was clear, and the stars began to emerge one by one. She felt a sense of peace that she had never known before, a calm understanding that she was safe and valued. She shared with him the emotions she had been holding inside for so long, the fear, the longing, the sadness, and now the hope. He listened as always and responded with encouragement, reminding her that her experiences had shaped her, but they did not limit her. She felt a profound sense of gratitude and trust, realizing that she had found a mentor, a guide, and a protector in someone who truly cared. This moment marked a critical shift in her life. She began to take deliberate steps toward rebuilding herself, setting goals and imagining a life beyond the walls that had once confined her. She sought knowledge wherever she could find it, practiced skills that would empower her, and nurtured relationships that were rooted in trust and kindness. The journey was gradual, filled with both triumphs and setbacks, but each step reinforced the understanding that she was not alone and that she had the power to change her life. Through this process, she learned the most important lesson of all, that one person's belief in her could transform her understanding of herself. The man's words, simple but profound, had opened a door that had long been closed. He had shown her that being seen, heard, and valued was not something to take for granted. It was life-changing. And with that understanding, she found the courage to embrace the future, to step into a world where she could define herself and to finally reclaim the life she had longed for. By the end of this period, she was no longer the frightened, unsure child who had once felt sold for a mere $6. She had begun to understand her own strength, to trust in the goodness of others, and to recognize that she was deserving of care, respect, and love. The turning point had arrived, and with it came the profound realization that the past could inform her journey. But it did not dictate the outcome. She could choose hope, courage, and dignity, and in doing so, she would continue to rise above the pain she had endured. The girl had come a long way. From a frightened child, lost and alone, she had begun to understand that life could hold more than pain and fear. She had endured hardships that could have crushed anyone, but instead, they had shaped her into someone strong, resilient, and determined. Her journey had been difficult, filled with loneliness, hunger, and sorrow. Yet she had discovered a kind of hope that refused to be extinguished, and now, with the guidance of the man who had believed in her, she was beginning to see a life beyond survival. A life where she could grow, heal, and thrive. She woke up each day with a quiet determination to make the most of her opportunities. Every morning she would take a moment to remind herself that she had value, that she was capable, and that she had the right to dream. She began to see education as a path to freedom. Each lesson she attended, each book she opened, became a step toward independence. Reading no longer felt like a chore. It became a door to the world beyond her immediate circumstances. Words and knowledge gave her power, the ability to imagine, plan, and one day create a life that was truly her own. As she learned, she also learned about compassion. She began to see the struggles of others around her, the small hardships, the silent fears, the moments of doubt. She realized that just as she had needed someone to see her, so did others. Whenever she could, she offered kindness. Whether it was helping a younger child with their chores, sharing a small piece of food, or simply offering a comforting smile. These moments gave her a sense of purpose, a way to contribute positively to the lives of those around her. She discovered that helping others not only strengthened them, but also helped her heal. Over time, the girl began to explore her talents and interests. She loved to write, capturing her thoughts, feelings, and dreams on paper. Writing became her way to process the past, to make sense of the pain she had endured, and to imagine a brighter future. She would write about the kindness she had received, the courage she had found within herself, and the small victories that made each day meaningful. Through writing, she realized she had a voice, a perspective that mattered, and a story that could inspire others. The bond between her and the man who had guided her continued to grow. He was no longer just a protector. He had become a mentor, a teacher, and a friend. He celebrated her accomplishments, encouraged her ambitions, and provided a steady presence in a world that could often feel unpredictable. His unwavering belief in her abilities helped her trust herself. She learned that support and guidance could transform a person's life, that love and care could empower someone to rise above circumstances that once seemed impossible. One day, the girl decided she wanted to help children like herself. She remembered the fear and loneliness she had felt when she was young, the hunger and despair that had been her constant companions, and the moments when she had felt invisible. She realized that there were others who needed someone to see them, to believe in them, and to guide them toward hope. She began volunteering at a local community center, helping children with their studies, listening to their stories, and offering encouragement. Every small success, every smile she brought to another child's face, reinforced the lessons she had learned. that even the smallest acts of kindness could change a life. Her confidence continued to grow as she stepped into new opportunities. She pursued further education, learned new skills, and prepared herself for independence. She began to understand that her future was not limited by the hardships of her past. Instead, her experiences had given her empathy, resilience, and a deep understanding of human strength. She had learned that surviving challenges was not just about enduring. It was about using those experiences to build a life of purpose, dignity, and hope. The girl also began to reconnect with the idea of family, understanding that family was not always defined by blood but by love, care, and support. She developed strong bonds with people who genuinely cared for her, forming relationships based on trust and mutual respect. These connections became a new foundation for her life, a reminder that she did not have to face the world alone. She learned to give and receive love freely, recognizing that she deserved happiness and belonging. Through her journey, she also discovered forgiveness, not of the wrongs done to her, but of herself. For the moment she had felt powerless, afraid, or unworthy, she understood that she had survived and grown stronger because she had not given up. She realized that holding on to anger or resentment would only weigh her down, preventing her from embracing the life she had fought so hard to reclaim. By forgiving herself and accepting her past as part of her story, she was finally able to move forward with a sense of peace and purpose. Her life began to take shape in ways she had once only dreamed of. She found work that allowed her to support herself, pursue her ambitions, and continue helping others. Every day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to apply the lessons she had learned: resilience, kindness, courage, and self-belief. She was no longer defined by the hardships of her childhood. She was defined by her strength, her compassion, and her determination to create a meaningful life. One afternoon, as she reflected on her journey, she thought about the man who had helped her see her worth. She realized that his belief in her had been the turning point, the moment that had allowed her to reclaim her life. Without his guidance, patience, and unwavering care, she might have continued to feel invisible, powerless, and alone. His simple but profound words, "You are never for sale in my eyes," had transformed her understanding of herself and the world. They had planted a seed of hope that had grown into a life filled with possibility. As she grew older, she also became an advocate for children in vulnerable situations. She spoke at community events, shared her story in safe and supportive settings, and worked tirelessly to ensure that other children had access to education, safety, and care. She understood the power of her experiences and wanted to use them to make a difference. Her work inspired others, showing that even those who have endured great hardships can rise, heal, and help transform the lives of others. Through all of this, she never forgot the lessons she had learned from her past. She remembered the pain, the fear, and the loneliness, but she also remembered the moments of kindness, the small victories, and the unwavering belief of the man who had changed her life. These memories became a guide, reminding her to be compassionate, resilient, and hopeful in everything she did. She understood that life would always have challenges, but that she now had the strength and knowledge to face them with courage. Her story became a testament to the power of belief, kindness, and human connection. She had started life feeling invisible, sold for a mere $6, and yet she had grown into a strong, independent, and compassionate young woman. She had transformed her pain into purpose, her fear into courage, and her past into a source of empathy for others. Her journey showed that no matter how dark the beginning, it is possible to find light, hope, and meaning with support, guidance, and determination. In the end, she understood the most important truth of all, that her worth had never been determined by her circumstances, but by the courage, resilience, and humanity within her. She had survived, she had grown, and she had created a life filled with hope, love, and purpose. And as she looked to the future, she knew that she could continue to rise, to inspire, and to make a difference, not only for herself, but for countless others who might one day walk a path similar to hers. Her journey, though marked by pain, had ultimately become a story of triumph. She had learned to believe in herself, to trust in the goodness of others, and to see the possibilities that life could hold. And with that understanding, she stepped forward, not as a child defined by her hardships, but as a young woman who had reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her future.